Hi, this is Tim from Tigret Astronomy. Welcome to the channel and welcome to our brand new series on Code Like a Ninja, Zero to Hero in C# with Tigret Astronomy. Hi there, my name's Tim Long. I'm a freelance software developer in the UK and I trade under the name Tigret Astronomy, and I specialise in creating software for astronomers. And I've been a developer professionally since about 1985 or 86, and my first job out of university was coding in 4-bit assembler, working on embedded systems for specifically telephones, consumer type telephone devices and payphones. And ever since then I've worked as a developer, so I've got something like 40 years experience as a developer. For the last 20 years I've been completely freelance, and in 2001 when Microsoft released C#, at the time I was using mostly the C language and a little bit of C++, and I thought I'll try this C# language and see if it's any good. And pretty soon I was hooked, and it's become the language that I prefer to use for my projects ever since. So hopefully I can if you're new to being a software developer, I hope I can teach you how to code in C#, and this is going to be an opinionated series in that I think people learn to code the wrong way. I think they learn bad habits early because it's easier to learn, and then pretty much they continue with those bad habits, or at least it's a struggle to unlearn them. So I'm going to challenge you in this course. I'm going to push you to deeper understanding. I'm going to teach you the techniques that I use as a professional developer. We're going to do things the right way, right from the beginning. We're going to focus on modern techniques such as test-driven development and the solid principles of object-oriented design. And we'll jump in to the deep end with both feet, and we'll learn by doing, and we'll then try to understand what we've done and why, and hopefully come out of it as better developers. Okay, so without any further ado, let's write some code. Okay, so in order to write code in C#, we're going to need a development environment which consists of a text editor and some other tools. So what I'd like you to do is make sure you've got Microsoft Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition, and the Community Edition is free, so it won't cost you anything. So you can see on the screen the Microsoft's web page. This is visualstudio.microsoft.com. and there are several products on here that you can download, and this is the one we want here, the first one, Visual Studio. A bit later on you might be interested in looking at this. This is Visual Studio Code, which is a more lightweight, more of a I won't say simple, but I actually use it just to edit text files on my system, so I use it instead of Notepad. Very, very capable editor and very much worth a look. It's cross-platform. It runs on Windows, Mac and Linux. And there's also Visual Studio for Mac if you are a Mac user and would like to follow along on your Mac. However, I am using Windows, and most of what I say will be directly relevant to Windows, and as I don't have a Mac, I can't really help you if things don't quite go according to plan. But nevertheless, you should be able to follow along and keep up with the course. So when you download Visual Studio, you get the choice of which edition you want, and The professional and enterprise editions cost quite a lot of money, so unless you're a professional developer, that's probably not for you. So just go with the community edition. It's got everything we need, and once you click that, then the download will begin, and there's my download beginning. Once the download's completed, you can double click that to start the install, and I've already installed it on my system, so I'll just show you what the installer looks like. So you're going to get a screen like this, which asks you which workload you wish to install, and Visual Studio is a massive, very capable integrated development environment, and it can cope with so many different types of projects. You can cope with Python development, cloud-based development, C++, C#, Visual Basic, F#, web development, and many other things. Okay, but to get us started, the workloads that you will need to follow along with this course is this one here, .NET desktop development, and scroll on down and select .NET Core cross-platform development, and then just as a nice thing to have, which for some reason isn't installed by default, click into the individual components tab here and scroll down, actually put into the search box here Class Designer, and scroll down and make sure you've ticked the Class Designer, and that should be everything you need to get started and follow along with me. We might revisit this later and install some extra workloads, but for now that's everything we need. So this could take a little while to install because it's a big program. Pause the video and I'll wait for you here and see you when you get back. Okay, welcome back. So hopefully you've been successful in installing Visual Studio 29 Community Edition, and you should see a screen something like the one I've got here. This is the start screen, and this is basically asking me what do I want to do, and we're going to create a new project from scratch. So we click the bottom option there, and this will open up the create a new project dialog, and we want to create a console application. So we will put into the search box console, and we have console app.NET Core, and that's the one we'll pick, console app.NET Core. Make sure it's got C# in here, and not this one here, which is Visual Basic. So it's the C# one we want, and we are going to click next, and then we need to supply a name. So our project name, now it's worth spending some time to get your project name right, because it has consequences for the project that are quite long lasting, and it's quite difficult to correct if you get this wrong. So let me tell you how I name my projects. First of all, I generally use a 3-part name. So sometimes more, sometimes less, but generally 3 parts. And the first part of the name is going to be something that identifies me or my organization. So in my case, I use TA, which is for Tigret Astronomy. If you don't work for an organization, you could just use your initials. So I might, for example, use TPL, but I'm going to use TA. And then I'm going to put a dot, and then I put the name of the project I'm working on, or the facility that I'm working on, unless there will sometimes be more than one project in a solution. But the project I'm working on now is the Code Like a Ninja project. So Code Like a Ninja. Okay, and then follow that by a dot, and then the part of the project that I'm developing is going to be the Hello World program. So we're just going to put Hello World like that. Now for the solution name, okay, this is the project name we've typed in, and Visual Studio has automatically given us a proposed solution name. Now, I'm expecting to have more than one project in this solution. A solution is like a top level group, and then under that you can have multiple projects. So I'm actually going to take the hello world off of the end of this, so our solution is going to be called ta.codelikeaninja, and our project is going to be called ta.codelikeaninja.hello-world. Okay, now this is the directory where everything will be created, and Visual Studio may well use a different default on your system, but this is usually under your user home directory, and then it creates a source directory and a repos directory. Sometimes it's in My Documents Visual Studio. Okay, and here we are. So this is our Hello World program, and you'll see that Visual Studio has filled in the program for us. And this is just about the simplest program you can write in C#. It's quite common when learning a new programming language to write the program called Hello World, which just writes out the string Hello World onto the display. And although that seems trivial, you actually have to know quite a lot to get this far. So the first thing is we'll run this program, and then we'll take a look at it and see what we've done. So in order to run a program, the easiest way is to click the green button at the top of the screen here. You can go debug, start debugging, but I generally use the green button here. That's also F5, I believe. So I've clicked that. This is starting the debugger, and this can take a little while. You'll see there's a little icon down here animated, and that is the Visual Studio building our project into runnable code. And now the debugger is starting. The console window has opened, so we've written a console application. So this runs as a command line program in a console window, and this is the console window. And it does take a few moments to start the debugger, and the debugger hooks itself into your program, and we'll cover that. We'll cover debugging in detail in a future episode, but for now just know that we are running the program in the debugger, and here we are. We have the output Hello World. This is from our program, and then we have some other stuff that we didn't write. So basically Visual Studio has, as a little convenience, put this thing on the end of our program, which it says to automatically close the console when debugging, stops, enable tools options debugging, automatically close the console, but otherwise press any key to close this window, and that's actually quite useful, so we'll keep that on for now. And then when you're done with the program, just press enter, or probably any key won't do it. Let's try. Yeah, it did actually. I pressed G and the program closed, and the debugger has closed, and we're back in the editor looking at our program. Okay, so if this is the first time you've seen a C# program, none of this is going to make sense. Don't worry, we'll break it down now. You've made a mistake already, and as a developer you will make a lot of mistakes, but luckily you get to correct most of them before anyone else sees them, so don't worry about it. And you remember I said it's worth taking time to get your project name right, because it has consequences and it's difficult to fix up if you get it wrong. Well, the first thing I've done is get my project name wrong, so I've obviously typed this incorrectly. I've missed the L here. That should have been Code Like a Ninja, and so I'll just quickly fix that up, so bear with me. That's the mess you have to go through if you get your solution name wrong. Take a couple of minutes and get it right first time. It's worth the extra effort. Okay, moving on. Let's look at our program and try and make sense of it. So the first thing we have here in this first line, I'm clicking the line number selects the whole line. Okay, that's a useful tip. Using system. Now, what does that mean? Well, that is telling the compiler, the C# compiler, that you wish to use some code in a library called system. It's actually importing a namespace is what we're doing. What's a namespace? Well, it's a way of what can happen when you have a big program. You have to come up with lots of names for things, and pretty quickly you start to run out of ideas, and if you're not careful, it's pretty easy to come up with a name that's already been used somewhere else. So that can be a bit of a limitation. So in order to get over that, we have the concept of namespaces, and as long as names are in different namespaces, the compiler knows they're different and can treat them as unique different names. So pretty much every piece of code you will write will declare its own namespace, and sure enough, the very next line in our code, we are declaring our own namespace for our particular project. So namespace ta.codelikeaninja.helloworld, and there can be as many of these separated by dots as you like, but it doesn't make sense to just arbitrarily go too deep. Just keep it simple if you can. The default is whatever you called your project. And then we have a squiggly bracket. Now, you'll see lots of squiggly brackets. These are called braces in C#, and C# is a block structured language, and anything you see enclosed in these braces is a block. So here we're starting a block from this line here, line 4, all the way down to line 12, and you can see this dotted line in the editor connecting the two braces together to indicate that those are the start and end of a block. Okay, so the other thing you can do is a useful tip called code folding, and in the editor here you can see there are boxes with minus signs in here. Now if I click that minus sign, then the whole program collapses into this one line, and so now we've just got our namespace declaration, our open and close braces, and the entire program is hidden on that single line there, and you can see the line numbers jump from 5 to 12. So again, this is called code folding. It's very useful when you've got a lot of code and you just want to focus in on one bit or some certain pieces of the code. You can fold away the code you're not interested in. It declutters the screen, it makes things easier to read, and you just expand that again by clicking the plus icon. There we go. Okay, so line 5, class program. Now, C# is an object-oriented language, and in object-oriented languages we define things called classes, and a class is a way of grouping together some data and some actions that can be performed on that data. And we'll go a little bit deeper into what an object is a little bit later on, but for now just know that this is pretty much how every program has to be written. You need at least one class. It can be called anything you like, but it's typically by default called program, and this is for runnable programs that you can start from the command line. So these will compile to a .exe executable file, and within the program class we have to define the main method. Now, a method is a piece of code that you can run. It's a kind of a unit of code, if you like, and methods have a name, and this is the name here, main, and then they have access modifiers, and that is the word static here as an access modifier. This is a little bit complicated to explain this earlier on, but basically it means that this method can be called without having to create an instance of the program class. It always exists, and it's always callable, which when you're starting a program from scratch is kind of useful. So the void keyword here means that the main method doesn't return anything. Okay, methods can return a value. They can return so you would call a method to work something out and return the answer, perhaps, but this type of method has a void return, which means it doesn't return anything. It just runs and doesn't return any results. And then we have an open bracket, and the thing between the open brackets is the parameter list. And parameters are pieces of information that are supplied to the method at runtime that it can use to do its job. Now, again, this is going to look a little bit cryptic at this point. This args parameter, args is the name of the parameter, and the thing in front is what data type it is. So in this case, it's an array of strings. And again, we'll cover what arrays are later on. It's named args, and this is actually supplied by Windows or your operating system. When the program is run from the command line, you can put command line options after the command, and those command line options will be passed into the program through this args parameter. Okay, we don't use it in our program, but it has to be written this way because this is just the way the operating system works. So don't worry too much if some of this doesn't make sense. We will come back to this again and again. Okay, so in the main method, okay, we start a block. Remember, C# is a block structured language. So we have another block here, and that brace to that brace is the block, and that is the body of the method. Okay, now in here is all the code that runs whenever we call this method. So the code that we've got here is console.writeLine, and then remember the within the parentheses here, because we are now calling a method instead of defining one, these are called arguments, and we are supplying one argument, which is a literal string, the thing in quotes, hello world, the text hello world. So this value gets passed into the console.writeLine method. Console.writeLine then sends that to the screen. We see the output in the console window, and the method is finished. We run into the end brace, so the method is finished, and it returns, and because there's no other code running here, the return passes control back to the operating system. In our case, it was the Visual Studio debugger, and the program is finished. Okay, so this brace here is the end of our program class, and this brace here at the bottom is the end of our namespace. There's a lot to take in there. Don't worry too much if you don't understand this, but just know that whenever you write a runnable program, there are different types of code you can write. A runnable program is one of the things. In this case, it's a console application. You pretty much, every runnable program has to have a structure like this or similar to this, and the main method is called the entry point because that's where everything starts running. So main is kind of a special method, and because this is just something that you just have to know, some people call this an incantation. So you just have to recite the incantation and everything will just work. Sometimes in programming, you just have to do it the way that people have done it forever, and there's sometimes no good reason for it, but that's just the way it has to be, and this is one of those cases. So there we are, that's our first program, and as I said, it might all look a bit cryptic at the moment, but don't worry, in the next episode we're going to write a program ourselves rather than one that the editor generated for us. We'll learn a few more concepts and hopefully some things will start to become clearer. So that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments if you've learned anything. I'd like to know, and if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. I've been Tim from Tiger Astronomy. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.